Taiwan and many Asian countries many times. Joseph, please.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Let me say on behalf of all of the co-sponsors, it is really a pleasure to have so many friends here, friends of Hong Kong, and indeed our friends from Hong Kong for this very important talk and this wonderfully delicious lunch. Let me begin by saying that I love Hong Kong. I'm not from Hong Kong, but I go to Hong Kong quite frequently and have always enjoyed my time there, not only in my capacity as director of the Asian Institute at the University of Toronto, but also as a researcher. Today's topic, which our colleagues will introduce momentarily, today's topic that we're going to be contemplating is an extremely important one. Yesterday, I spent the last 2 days, I was in Ottawa for a conference on Canada-China bilateral relations, and we were discussing over a very intensive 2-day conference basically the future of the world order, the future of the global economy, and Canada's place in it. We here in Canada know what it's like to live beside a giant. We live in a world where we live beside giants, and certainly Hong Kong is very much used to and adapting to living beside a giant, a huge giant, and probably will be the most important giant in global political economy in just a few years. As a result, Hong Kong has always impressed me because of its extraordinary dynamism and innovative capacity. And dynamism and innovative capacity are these words that are now sort of casually bandied about, I think, in many ways at a very rhetorical level. And I actually think that when we think about Hong Kong, we have to really dig deeper and understand the true meaning of dynamism and innovation as a way of understanding Hong Kong. This is a place that is small, that does not have the scale advantages that giants in the global economy have, yet it has been extraordinarily adaptive. It has moved from being largely a merchant entrepot economy to developing a domestic manufacturing sector and capacity, and of course now into the area of financing, which it leverages its extraordinary legal infrastructure. And the innovation doesn't stop there. Over the past several years, I've visited Hong Kong several times doing some research, trying to understand how it's continuing to adapt, particularly in the post-97 era, to a new world economy, and an enormous giant to its north. And we have seen continued innovation. New financial instruments are being developed in the banking sector in Hong Kong. Very exciting, things that I don't completely understand, but I'm trying to learn. We have seen a burgeoning science and technology capacity with the Science Park, and also increasing R&D capacity and attracting foreign firms to Hong Kong for higher value-added returns. And also we are seeing a much more sophisticated, both technologically and organizationally, logistics management. It's just fascinating. I've spent hours hanging around the ports and learning how logistics management and freight forwarding is being carried out in dynamic, innovative places like Hong Kong. So this is an extraordinarily adaptive place, and we're going to learn about how Hong Kong is continuing to adapt. What it means to Canada is extremely important because Hong Kong also fashions itself, not just rhetorically, but very much empirically, as a gateway. And this is crucial. The entire world is looking at China as not only a trading partner, but also as potentially the new consumer of last resort in the global economy. But China, of course, is huge. And as a political economist, we're always looking for ways in which we can disaggregate this. And indeed, indeed our foreign policymakers and deep faith in Ottawa are also looking for ways in which to disaggregate this. We're looking for strategic entry points. And Hong Kong presents to us here in Canada precisely one of those strategic entry points. And it's then, again, an adaptive, innovative, dynamic capacity in Hong Kong that is continually evolving this gateway. So as a Canadian who is interested in Asia, I'm absolutely thrilled that we have these three experts here today to share with us their views of Hong Kong today, but also Hong Kong into the future. We have with us the head of the delegation from CUHK, Professor Michael Conville, who was also the founding dean of the law school at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, who's educated in the UK and has worked and taught and also headed law schools in the US, the UK, and now in Hong Kong. We also have Dr. Arthur McInnes, who I've just learned is the father of one of my former students at the University of Toronto. Obviously, the connections between Hong Kong and Toronto run very deep. Dr. McInnes is a native Canadian lawyer, an established academic, and has now been working at CUHK and also has been the past president of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce there. And last we had Mr. Dennis He, who is a Hong Kong trained practitioner of law, and he is an expert in China trade and the China legal practice. So we have collectively, we have individually here, three of the leading lights of the legal profession and legal training institutions in Hong Kong, but collectively we have a treasure trove here and we look forward to learning from you. So without further ado, our speakers.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for that introduction, and thank you very much to our sponsors, to the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Council for inviting us. I'm going to be very brief, and I know we're already overrunning the time, so I'm just going to give a few insights into what's been happening in the legal structure in Hong Kong that is going to, I think, have resonance for many years to come. There was enormous anticipation in the run-up to 1997 as to exactly what would happen to the structure of the Hong Kong legal system. Built into the basic law was one provision, which was to enable the Court of Final Appeal to have the ability to appoint judges from anywhere in the common law regions. And what has happened is that that provision, under Article 92, has been exploited with brilliance since 1997. And coming into Hong Kong has been a procession of non-permanent judges of the greatest distinction and eminence from the common law world. I won't go through the list, but many of you will know. These are household names, Chief Justices from Australia, New Zealand, UK, Masters of the Robes, Lords, Pure and Ordinary, people from the Supreme Court. These have brought in something that's very important in understanding Hong Kong, which is international eminence and stature, but also they've imported and strengthened the idea of the rule of law being not local parochialism, but founded upon generalized principles and values, which are important for an international city like Hong Kong. They've embedded internationalization and embedded the rule of law and the judiciary by repute across Hong Kong is the most revered of all of Hong Kong's institutions. And that's important while creating a particular business environment. At the same time, the outgoing Chief Justice, Justice Lee, who was Hong Kong's first Chief Justice from 1997, in his opening address to the legal year of 1999, he drew attention to the need to reinforce the legal profession in Hong Kong on a more generic level. In particular, he was concerned about the quality of lawyers who were entering the bar at that time. And he called for a rethink of legal education. a big major report ensued, and the Standing Committee oversaw a whole set of changes. They included, very briefly, the introduction from a 3-year to a 4-year undergraduate degree, so that the 25% additionality would be non-law based, so that students would have a much more expanded view of the world. They now have the capacity to exchange with partners around the world. They can study abroad. They can add an extra year to get a double degree in law and business, law and translation. They can bring a great deal more to the profession than was possible prior to 1997. Secondly, all Hong Kong education institutions have introduced a Juris Doctor program. What that means is it's a graduate law degree which brings in people from other disciplines into the legal profession. So they can, within 2 years, get a qualification which will admit them to the practitioner 1-year training program. What has happened is the very best of talents from across a whole range of fields, business, accounting, psychology, medicine, all are coming in to the profession through this new route, again to instantiate a different approach from the historic narrow base of legalism. And the third thing running alongside that is the practitioner year, which follows. Is a mandatory gateway into the legal profession in Hong Kong. Used to be more law. You had a lot of law in the undergraduate program, and you got 1 more year of law. So it was a bit like the Peking duck. The students were stuffed by the end of year 3. They got even more stuffed by the end of the 4th year. And that produced a very narrow set of practitioners who did not have an expanded view of the world. That has been abandoned. That year now is effectively turned on its head. So for being 10-15% based on skills, it is now 85 to 90% skills based, with very little law that is necessary in order to secure that set of generic skills. So the education process has changed, and feeding into the profession now are a range of diverse backgrounds, people with an expanded view of the law, with bringing in other skills and other disciplines. And thirdly, the thing that has changed more generally is that alongside of this, apart from anything else, has been the introduction of academic competition. There are now 3 law schools in Hong Kong, and at the base of this is competition. And competition does 2 things. It introduces diversity, and it drives standards. And you will see that one of the effects of that is now pouring into the global environment. You will see in things such as mooting competitions that Hong Kong is not simply figuring very highly and prominently in the international mooting competitions, but is actually winning them. And that has done enormous benefit for Hong Kong. It has put Hong Kong on the legal map so that people actually want to come to this environment to exchange their skills, their backgrounds, their cultures with that which is evident in Hong Kong itself. So what it offers in particular for the business and for doing business through law is an international environment, one in which globalization is not a theory, but is a day-to-day practice, in which cultures meet so that we have a tremendously international cosmopolitan environment which is sympathetic to and a natural environment for business. And I would say that it is not a slogan anymore, but it is a matter of statement of practice to say that Hong Kong, in a very different way than it was in 1997, is now open for business. And it's my pleasure to pass on now to my co-speakers, We have Dr. Arthur McGuinness, who is Canadian. I used to mix him up with Tim Holden, but now he tells me that he has other virtues than sending me to the favourite eating spots. And he also asked me to mention that he's only fathered one or two of the students of Joseph Wong, and that he has many other talents. Arthur?
Joseph, thank you very much for those remarks and the introduction. It's great to be back. It's great to be back, as we all know, at least everyone in this room, Canada's national city. Or as I used to call it growing up in Regina, Toronto. But branding is very important because we're here from Asia's World City. You can see the banners behind you. Let me just remind you what a few of those features of Asia's World City are and perhaps why we're here. Number one in Asia for international companies, regional headquarters. 3,800 companies. There are about 50 of those which are Canadian. The difference today, though, is there are additionally 3,800 mainland companies, which are also headquartered there. World's most pro-business economy, according to the Wall Street Journal. The number 3 for ease of doing business, according to the International Financial Corporation. And according to Steve Forbes, the 3rd best tax system in the world. These are huge advantages. The Dean mentioned 1997. There was a question prior to 1997 whether or not Hong Kong would be willing to stand up to SOEs from China. Well, the answer's been given many times. We were given it again on October 8th when 2 members of the ICBC Bank, China's largest, were indicted. Hong Kong remains a transparent, fair, a just society where they're not afraid to actually take on the challenges that need to be taken on. Free flow of information. I said free flow, not free throw. I know you've got a Raptors team. Hong Kong has a very dramatic free press, 130 media organizations, 40 plus newspapers, and 700 plus local periodicals. That's remarkable. No censorship of the internet. At the same time, there's rigorous policing of IP rights, indeed, and this worries my son, of course, because he's always online. But the first successful file sharing prosecution occurred in Hong Kong, Chiang Mai in 2005. So again, the legal protections which are always there. When I talk about Hong Kong, I like to talk about East and West and the best of both worlds, or sometimes easiest. And I was reminded again of the advantages by the Secretary for Justice, our Minister for Justice, if you will, at a forum on the edges of the World Expo on July 6th in Shanghai recently. And this is what he had to say about that one country, two system slogan. He said, the principle has presented unprecedented opportunities for Hong Kong. It strengthens our ties with the mainland on the one hand and allows us to extend our international network on the other, providing Hong Kong and the mainland the greatest flexibility and scope for development. Now, that of course was a slogan that would have made David Oakley proud, one country, two systems. And when it was conceived originally, it was meant to be defensive. It was meant to protect Hong Kong, as it were, in its traditions and its way of life. It's done that. But as you can see, 13 years later, it's now being used to leverage the advantages that Hong Kong and China present together. And I think that's significant. You have to admit it's certainly very creative. At that forum, which was co-hosted not only by the Department of Justice of Hong Kong, but also the Bar and the Law Society of Hong Kong and the Hong Kong International Arbitration Center, the ICC was the final co-sponsor of that forum, the International Chamber of Commerce. Why the ICC? The ICC has just opened its first branch of the Court of Arbitration outside Paris. First time they've ever opened outside Paris. And I'm told that they already have 150 disputes that they're managing out of that Hong Kong office. Now, of course, there's a positive and a negative side to that message because it's obviously disputes, but it tells you that people are looking to Hong Kong to resolve trade disputes in that part of the world. And I think that's telling. It's obviously supported by the business community. What else was the minister selling? He was selling, again, rule of law, the Hong Kong advantages that the Hong Kong Economic Trade Office, of course, routinely promotes. High degree of autonomy, also held out increasingly as the model for reunification of Taiwan. Lately, Hong Kong was mentioned in the 11th five-year plan that China puts out. That too was a first. People 37 years before now the full integration of Hong Kong into China, are no longer looking at it with trepidation. Hong Kong, as was mentioned, was an original gateway for foreign direct investment into China. But increasingly that door is swinging both ways. It's not only the inbound FDI, which is of course there, and which is significant. And UNCTAD has actually said that Hong Kong leverages tenfold its current gross domestic product in terms of foreign direct investment that it puts into China. So it's a significant player, and obviously punching above its weight. But increasingly Hong Kong is serving as the outbound, if you will, gateway for foreign direct investment to other parts of the world. So while we look at those figures in the hundreds of billions into China, okay, we're seeing in the tens of billions now beginning outbound through Hong Kong, using Hong Kong companies, etc., to invest, whether it's in Canada or elsewhere. That will only continue. And if there's one message I'd like to give you, it's the fact that Hong Kong will get the same run over the course of the next 10 or 15 years that it's had prior with the opening up of China for the inbound. The same protections and the same attitude. And I think that's significant. Recently MOFCOM actually just dropped the thresholds because they have an inbound and they have an outbound catalog for my lawyers who are here. When the first outbound foreign investment catalog came out about 4 or 5 years ago, they actually put legal services in that catalog. So you can expect to see, I'm sorry to say for some of you, you don't want extra competition, PRC law firms opening in Toronto. When that will be, I don't know, but the catalog has okayed it, so that's significant. The threshold about $300 million now for review into China, the same threshold, interestingly, which Investment Canada has today for inbound into Canada. Company listings. Last week when I looked, I think there were about 556 Hong Kong companies listed. If we look at the S&P this week, we probably see that 2 or 3 more. Of those, the capitalization is about $900 billion for PRC companies. That's of a $2.3 trillion total. The TSE is 11th in the world, and it's about $1.7 trillion in terms of its overall market cap. So it gives you a relative comparison of what the two are doing. Now, there is a massive enterprise that surrounds the listing of those companies in terms of legal, accounting, communications, whatever else it is. But when you see those companies, it's there and you think about them, they might be an SOE or they could be a private company. What's remarkable is the advantages that they're taking in the system, the global system, because they might be listing in Hong Kong, but they're incorporated typically in a low tax jurisdiction, tax haven, if you will. Grand Cayman is typically being a jurisdiction of preference. So you've got state-owned companies listing in Hong Kong, incorporated in the Grand Caymans, using, Western law firms. Remarkable. I mean, who would have thought that possible, again, 25 years ago? What's Canada's latest thinking on the PRC? Well, in a report also published in July by the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, entitled and really raising the question, are we doing enough? Perrin Beattie, in the forward to that, the current president of the Chamber, answered shortly, no, Canada was not doing it. And ironically, well, there was a bit of a call for more government, such a contrast with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. He also indicated some of the things that could be done. I don't want to go through all the details of those, but I'll refer you to them. And I'll equally point out some of the challenges which are there, because we have so many lawyers in the crowd. One of them that he noted for inbound to China was the opacity of the legal system. Hong Kong itself, of course, serves as a natural corrective to that opacity. And indeed, it's not just foreigners who, of course, invest in China through Hong Kong. It's the Chinese themselves. In other words, it's the PRC companies that come out of China, set up again in Hong Kong, and then reinvest in China. And we talk about double tripping and round tripping and these kinds of things. It's remarkable. Why do they do that? They get the benefit, of course, of the infrastructure that Hong Kong provides, and they get the benefit of the foreign treatment. One of the things I, again, how much time I have, if I talk about CEPA and the WTO, China acceded to the WTO in 2001. They had a 5-year window for transition. That ended in 2005, 2006. But in 2003, 2 years after China signed the WTO, they created an exception for Hong Kong called the Closer Economic Partnership Agreement, or or CEPA. Now, I don't have to tell anyone in this room about free trade agreements. You all know NAFTA. You know the pros and the cons. But to have created that exception so early for Hong Kong to say, you receive these benefits over and above those that we've agreed to globally was outstanding. And I know, for instance, in the legal services sector, they continue to press China in terms of ultimately moving to what will be full reciprocity for Hong Kong lawyers doing business in China. Full reciprocity. And they will get it. I don't know when exactly, but they will get it. Already there's a great deal of arrangements are there in terms of relationships, associations, and those kinds of things. But that is the direction. And again, that's another reason why I'm an advocate of Hong Kong. Looking at these matters from Hong Kong as a gateway, both inbound and outbound, is significant. What do you need to succeed? If I can sum this up as 3 or 4 things that are going into China, I think you need these things. I think you need a good product or service, and certainly Canada has them. You need a business plan, understand. But equally, you need commitment, and that commitment may imply financial resources, it may imply human resources, etc. By a number of things, but certainly those two I draw your attention to. And lastly, you need, I would say, a local market. In my experience of working with Canadian business going into Hong Kong or going into China, the ones which often excel and who have had the greatest success have been those who have gone in and worked initially with a local partner. I can talk about the law firms at length. Many top-notch Toronto law firms which went in the 90s, perhaps in part for they had truly firm, and in that capacity, that's fine. And there are hundreds, and indeed that's the role that the Hong Kong lawyers play in the PRC law firms today, is as foreign legal consultants. They're not practicing or advising on PRC law, they're advising on Hong Kong law. And you can go tomorrow